Okay, so welcome everyone to week 10. So within this week, we're gonna looking at the site plans and several materials for your model makings. So I'll begin with explaining what is a site plan. So by this stage, you should have a very clear ideas of what your site look like and spend some time observing recordings on the physical characteristic of your site and the site context of yours. So it will be a very good time now to understand what is a site plan. So a site plan is basically a satellite view toward your site, very similar to the floor plan. However, it viewed from a much more higher levels. So the purpose of the site plan is to show how your buildings sit inside the context of your site. And depending on the context of your site, some choose the park in a suburban area, some choose the park sort of like a reserved park, which has a very massive empty space, a completely public space. So with that, it have a very different context, but the site plan usually have to address certain things within the site. So that's including the vegetations, the trees, the accessible parts, any nearby structure or like the nearby home or anything like that, water bodies, so that including the lake and the ponds within the area, and in particular the land slope, which is the make up the topography of your site. So the site plan have to looking at how your buildings fit inside your site, and then how would you using the graphics to display those site characteristics as named above. And also within a site plan, it must show the orientations of your buildings and also the site. So when you develop the site plan, it can be later used as a site analysis. This is not really the case for this unit, but in later on Design Studio, you'll be required to do a site analysis. So you need to include much more graphics to indicate the sun directions, wind directions, north and south sources, pedestrian traffic flow, population densities, or any record human activities within the area. So with that, it comes to the creative parts where how would you use graphics to indicate on of this to make your site plan become the site analysis. So a site plan is a very fundamental drawings. Within your site plan, some of you, well, most of you actually have an area that have a slope. So you must use a contour line to indicate the land slope. So what is a contour line? So the contour line basically from our eye level, we can see the slope, and it can be easily noticed when you're sitting, when you're looking at a hill, a valleys, or mountains. So normally you can only see the slope on the 3D, and when you have to transcribe it back into the 2D site plan, you must use the contour line. So basically the contour line is, if you're looking at several drawings within my PowerPoint, you see that it's basically a slicing through the slope of the site, and it got the number. So that number indicating the height of that cuttings, and as compared to the highest or the lowest levels. So with the highest is the top of that area, of the slope area, or as the lowest level, which is the sea levels. So looking at again in here, on the right example, you will see that it have 3,500, then range down to 3,250, to 2,500, and then 2,100, 1,500. So with that, because the site plan also have to be in a scale, right? So the spacings between each of these contour line is also indicating sort of like what is the distance from that 3,500 area to the 3,000 area, what's the length. And so when they constructed in the 3D, then it will clearly demonstrate sort of like the slope in that sense, which is again on the right examples right here. So how would you consider your site plan and your contour lines? So as I have said before, and I have instructed that you should record and observe your site carefully. So record all of those and then try to reflect back to your own site plan. Okay, so think of the elements, think of graphics to represent, for example, trees and water bodies, and also discuss with me sort of like what you really need to include, because within your site plan, let's say your building just locate a tiny proportions within this area. So the example that I grabbed in here is from our Royal Botanic Gardens. It is unnecessary to make a site plan as big as within this screen, right? So with that, you need to zoom in intensively more. So with the zooming in from the Google Earth, that will effectively change the scale of your site plans. So you need to carefully check the size of your museum and pavilions and how does it allocate within your selected area of your site. Then determine the proportion of your site plan, that is the scale. So let's say if your building is around 10 meter long, and then within the whole complex is only about 10 meter long within the area of 1,000 meters square. So you have to think carefully about what sort of scale gonna be fit inside both your A3 and also include only necessary site characteristic. Because you cannot include, for example, if my building is located within this example right here, then it's quite necessary to include the buildings on the right, isn't it? Because it's too far away, but definitely I need to include the lakes near it, the waters and the accessible part, and also the trees nearby it as well. So after you're figuring out what sort of proportions of your site plan is, then determine the scale. What will be the scale of that proportion going to fit inside your A3 page? Okay, so again, you need to consult with me, and in order to successfully consult with me, it is good to have sort of like the boundary sketch of how big, how large your buildings and how will it sit into your site, so then I can give you a more constructive feedback. So as I have said, that with your site plan, it include quite a different it have to transcribe different characteristics, including the trees, the lakes, the water bodies, and the accessible part and the contour line. So you must use Google Earth to figuring out the shapes and the trees, the shape of the land and the trees within itself, and also the accessible part. So Google Earth will do that trick quite good. And with that, you can check on the scale bar on the top, on the bottom right of the Google map. So that scale bar will assist you when you need to enlarge these site plans back into your drawings, because with the site plan, again, it has to be hand draw. So you need to enlarge it and then print it out, overlay it, and trace it. So you need to trace the shape of your land, the trees, the water bodies, and also the contour lines. When it comes to the contour line, you have to use this website. So it's called mapshare.vic.gov.au. Okay, so that is to figuring out the contour lines. So this is the website, and this is sort of like the interface of the website. So in order to generate the contour line, you must go, after you go into the website, click on tools, and then type in the locations of your site. So in my example, I use the Botanic Gardens, located within the near the Shrine of Remembrance, Royal Botanic Gardens. So not quite sure why it's not coming up here. Okay, so let's say I have these area, and to generate the contour lines in here, so you click on tool. I couldn't find the my area, so in here I just pick up sort of like the Victoria Lake Caravan Park. So with that one, I click on the layer list, and then as soon as I scroll down, it got the contour options in here. Click on it, and then allow a few options. So again, depending on how much you zoom into the details, it got the contour line ranging from 1 to 5 meters. So again, reflecting back onto our contour line examples in here, each of these represent, for example, within the middle one, it represents a gap of 10 meters. So anything in between, for example, 1 meter segment between the 10 to 20s, it will not appear. So depending on how large, how big your site is, you should select the appropriate contour line. So I would say the contour line for 1 to 5 fit into sort of like the pavilion size of your. 10 is sort of like for the planning of the neighborhood level. 20 is pretty huge for me. It could be going to the urban area, and the contour line 1 to 70K is about looking at the whole site of a natural landscape, perhaps sort of like a reserve park, the Dandenong range, for example. So anything larger than that will fit into the use of the larger contour lines. So because our projects deal with specific and very small scale, so I would say click on this one. So as soon as that popping up, so you will see all of this contour line, so it's loading at the moment, it will come out, and it would take some time. So pardon my internet is a little bit slow today. Okay, so it doesn't really change much, but within the contour line in here, as soon as you zoom in, it will have the number. So that number is by meter. So again, you can print out the screen and then try to use the scale bar underneath here. So that is right at the bottom, the bottom of the page, and then enlarge it into the scale, the appropriate scale of your site plan. Remember, you need to overlay the map of the contour line along with the Google Earth map on the same scale, so that's gonna fit, and then you can use the contour line and you can trace it. Okay, so again, the contour line has to be hand drawn as well, so try to figure out a way how to do it. It's quite simple, isn't it? So enlarge it into the scale, trace it, fit it with the Google Earth, and then with the Google Earth, you would copy the details, including the trees, the building, and the accessible part, which MapShare also have that as well. So it's up to you to use how would you use the two interactive map together. Okay, so if you have any play around with your MapShare and vic.gov.au to determine how big your contour line, note down, okay, so I'm going to use the contour line, I'm going to use this scale, and if you have any question, just pop up into the online consultation and I'll help you out. Now it comes to the models. So with the models, you are required to make a handmade architectural models. And with the models also have to be up to scale. So the scale of the models is entirely depending on how large you want to make it, but it has to be fit into a scale of 1 to 100, 1 to 2000, 1 to 200, 1 to 300 if that's fairly large. If not, gonna be 100 and 150, or 150 if you have some sort of like a small to medium scale. Okay, so the scale again is entirely depending on your design and also the size of your museum and pavilion space. So prior to determine what scale your building is, you must have a solid design ideas of how your buildings, your museum and pavilion look like. Then use your scale ruler to figuring out how big your model will be, because you also have to make the surrounding site as well. So you have to accommodate to a certain extent of you have to grade the surrounding landscape as well, the topographies, the water bodies, the trees as well, which I'll come to the later part of how to do it. Okay, so if you're quite unsure what scale your buildings is and how much your architectural model will cover the site, then show me your site plan, show me your ideas, and tell me your approach, and I'll figuring out how would you go about all of these. And with the models, there are two ways to create your models. One is called a sectional models, because you have to review the interior space. So these two methods are the best way of reviewing the interior perspective. So the first is called a sectional model. So basically you have the whole model, but then you split it into half. And so the splitting will including the buildings and also the site. So this is a very useful for the design that have the building integrated into the slope or in buried underground, or perhaps that it located on the water bodies. Okay, so the more conventional model have the roof being lifted up. So you must have the interior exposed to some certain extent. So you have to take the photos of the inside of your model as well. Okay, so again, to choose what kind of method would be best to go about your architectural models is entirely depending on your design. And again, you should have a concrete idea before determine what sort of method of your model making will be. So with the materials, these are some of the most common material, and I'm figuring out it's easy to work with. So the first one is called the balsa wood. So it's very crisp, and it comes with different shape and thicknesses. So the thickness range from 1 millimeter to 3 millimeters, but use the sheet of 1.5 millimeter to 2.5. It's easier to cut with. One thing I'm figuring out is the 1 millimeter balsa wood sheet is sometimes because it's too crisp. While you're cutting it break apart, and with the 3 millimeter, it's very tough and it's hard to cut with. It also come with a balsa wood dowel. So in shape of columns, it come with different radius or the rectangular shapes as well. So try to sharpen up your knife, and I will come to the cutting tools later. Change the knife frequently, so you're gonna have a sharp tips to cut through the wood. And thickness is also good to mimicking the thicknesses of your structure as well, and also the materials of your pavilion space. Next one would be the foam core. This is a widely used architectural models, and it comes with 3 or 5 millimeter thicknesses. You have to cut multiple times, otherwise it's gonna damage the form inside. Of course, these are very tough very tough materials, and so it's easily deal with a straight and perpendicular intersected shape and form. So it doesn't really work well with the curvy one. So with the curvy, you might need to use a more flexible foam core, or you have to soak the foam core into the water. Balsa wood, I don't really think you can bend balsa wood. You can, but there will be techniques to do so. So again, don't be afraid of how you approach the material. You would think like, oh, because my shape is so curvy, I cannot do it. Well, I have a few examples that your model can be curvy, and I will show you how to do so. So as long as you have a concrete idea. So in my example here is sort of like it hit more of the general audience and less your specific need. When you have a specific need, talk to me during the online consultation, and I'll show you how to go about how to curve balsa wood, how to curve foam core, things like that. So don't be afraid, and just feel free to explore. You can type Google how to make curvy wall in architectural model. It comes with different tons of ways, and one of the most common way, for example, dealing with foam core would be with the foam core, they cut into several strip, And so the cuttings, it doesn't completely cut with sort of like the scoring. So the scoring allowed the foam core to be bendable. Okay. So the next, apart from foam core and balsa wood, you can use brown card boxes. So brown card boxes sometimes can be used to make the models, but mostly used to make the topography of the site. So it comes with different thicknesses, and 1.5 to 1 millimeter, it usually easy to cut. Transparent PVC sheet. So I normally use this to mimic water texture or glazing panels. However, I figuring out that the transparent sheet, it's quite dirty when you put on your PVA glue. Again, tools for cutting and making model will explain later. So make sure that you have the appropriate tool and apply enough glue, just enough glue, otherwise it's gonna look ugly. And remember, if you have a sweaty hand, wear some clothes, or always have yourself ready with tissues. Okay, so when you apply your palms or you lean your palms onto the PVC sheet, usually leave the fingerprint on that. So make sure you have a good clean before you taking the models. The last one will be it's called polypropylene sheet. So it's similar to transparent PVC, but it's very, very flexible. So again, this is particularly good to making curvy or quirky glazing shapes or so. And polypropylene sheet, sort of like a good mimic of the material in real life. So it's just transparent material. Kind of forget the name, but I will come back to you with that in the online consultations. With balsa wood, of course, it represents wood. Foam core, it can represent concrete. Cat boxes can represent bricks or so, depending on the thickness you choose and depending on the thickness of your design. So, of course, it comes with you have to making the surrounding landscape. So one thing that I would like you to avoid is using fake green miniature trees that you can find from Kersley, because it sort of distract the integrity and the cohesiveness of your architectural model. It's really about simplicity and not really about the expressive and the accuracy of how would you how would you mimic exactly the grass in there, trees in there. Rather than that, you can use a few examples to making trees of the above right here. So first is using the balsa dowel, and then using the transparent sheet, punch them into hole and cut them into triangular sheet, and then just sort of like skew it together. The second one is called baby bread tree. So it usually for boutique flowers. And it's quite simple. I quite enjoy this one as well, especially when it becomes dry. It mimicking the trees. It got the slant, sort of like a slender form and shape, which doesn't distract the people when they're looking at your models. Third one will be using fabric string, so the cloth string or things like that, and then you can use the aluminum frames to sort of like framing it together. And again, steel wire. So when you go to a Kersley or Bunnings, you will see a bunch of steel wires come with different radius. Choose a smaller one and twist it around, and then you have the steel wires. So within this website, within the link below, it shows you how to make the topography for your site, how you calculate the spacing for your building to sit inside here. I will send you through this PowerPoint slide when you need it via your via the online consultations, otherwise attached to the emails. With the model making tools, the first one you're gonna need is a proper paper knife. So when the tips of the plates are gonna dull, you can change it, just snap it in half, and then you're gonna use the next one, which is fresh. Scalpel is very handy when you need to carve like windows or so, especially when you deal with foam core, because when you put in the paper knife into the foam core, If that will be a very small detail on the foam core, it's gonna destroy the foam itself within inside. So scalpel allow you to detailedly carve small details, and of course you're gonna need the steel ruler. If you use the paper knife with the steel with the plastic ruler, for sure it will cut the plastic ruler and potentially go into your hands. So be careful with that. So use the steel ruler to navigate, and with your paper knife lean against the steel ruler, so it got the good a more concrete reference point when you do the cuttings. And with the PVA glue, so it sort of have a milky texture and very weird smell. But PVA glue, I would not suggest you to use the instant glue because it's very messy. With PVA, after you applied it, it's not gonna instantly dry, but you're gonna wait a while. So with that, it's gonna be very good if you're making mistake and realize you need to readjust it. And because you're gonna use the PVA glue, after you buy it, you will see that because it's very milky, and if you applied it, for example, onto the edge of the balsa wood, sometime when you squeeze the bottle, it's gonna go over the places. So you need a very good control over the amount of glue you're gonna put into your materials. When it comes to that, painting brushes, so it comes with different tip size. Normally I use something around the last tips in here. So I pour the glue out, the PVA glue out into a bowl. Then I dip my brushes into the glue, and then I just sort of like paint it across that edge of my materials. So again, this is sort of like the generic audience. A more specific of how you go about your architectural model, please discuss with me during the online consultations. And that's it for this week. Okay, so remember, within this week online consultations, you need to really solidate your design idea, because this is already week 10, and week 12 will be our last teaching week. I'm not sure about the submission week just yet, but because time does fly and we only got 2 more weeks to discuss what will be your design ideas, how will be the documentation is, and of course it's gonna come into how would you go about your perspective views and your isonometric as well. So please consolidate your design ideas, either in the mean of sketches or models, mock-up models, and then discuss with me. So then we're gonna have a very good conversation about how would you go about your site plan, and as well as your architectural models as well, because this is a design part, the design component within this unit. So I also focus on the design thinking as well. I will ask questions including why would you approach that idea, why are you design like that, what sort of experience you're gonna propose within that space of your, and how does that transition to the next space. So again, you can be looking at others architectural works that are already complete, and then use that as a reference, transcribe back to your conceptual model, scale it up into the architectural senses, and let's see how you start from there. Okay, work hard and remember to show a lot during our consultations. So that's it for this week videos. So all the best, and I'll see you soon.